On the surface, South Korea appears to be one of the most extraordinary success stories the world has ever seen. A nation that went from being poorer than many African countries to becoming one of the richest. In less than 50 years, all while its northern neighbor languished in economic isolation. The media often paints a glowing portrait of South Korea as a nation that can do no wrong. By combining the harshest aspects of capitalism with rigid traditional hierarchies, South Korea has built a society obsessed with relentless competition. A culture of stress and survival has deep historical roots. Korea was invaded and brutally occupied by Japan for 35 years in the early 20th century. This intense focus tapped into a cultural drive rooted in Confucian ideals of respect, hierarchy, and unyielding dedication. But while such values are common across East Asia, South Korea took them to an extreme, making academic achievement the ultimate measure of personal worth. Followed by liberation in 1945 and the devastation of the Korean War just 5 years later, a plan to rebuild the nation through education and hard work soon spiraled into an all-consuming obsession. This has birthed Korea's Sampo generation, the three sacrifice generation, who give up on relationships, marriage, and children just to survive in a cutthroat economy. A 2019 survey found 90% of young South Korean women and 82% of men believe those born into poverty can never compete with the wealthy. South Korea's capital, Seoul. The problem is most extreme. The traditional model of an early married, stay-at-home mother is incompatible with modern economic realities. Yet South Korea still heavily stigmatizes childbirth outside of marriage. Just 2% of births occur outside wedlock, compared to the OECD average of around 40% and 60% in places like France. Reducing the stigma and legally recognizing unmarried families could help, but the government seems unwilling to confront these cultural taboos, and lack of oversight cost over 300 lives. To Samsung's bribery scandal, which led to the impeachment of a president. The chaebol stranglehold has slowed productivity and innovation by creating rigid markets that protect large firms and leave startups struggling. Labor laws favor seniority over merit, making it harder for companies to adapt and for young people to find stable work. Over half of the country lives there, and restrictive housing policies have turned real estate into a bidding war favoring the elite. Unsurprisingly, fewer people want to have children. These problems aren't mere byproducts of industrialization.
No.
They're woven into the very fabric of Korea's success. The question now is not whether South Korea can change, but whether it's willing to challenge the very systems and beliefs that brought it to this point. Some even blame feminism for the falling birth rate, yet Korea's demographic crisis predates modern feminist movements by decades. Fertility fell below replacement level back in 1983, long before feminism became mainstream in Korea. Meanwhile, the soaring cost of living and brutal work hours leave little time or money for raising children. Hierarchies can have deadly consequences. Malcolm Gladwell's Outliers highlights how, in the 1997 Korean air crash, junior pilots were too afraid to correct a superior's error, leading to a tragedy that killed over 200 people. Over time, these hierarchies expanded beyond the workplace, into every aspect of Korean society. Where chaebols operate with little accountability and cozy ties to politicians, education is no longer a reliable path to upward mobility. In most developed countries, a university degree leads to 40% higher pay. During industrialization, these family-run conglomerates like Samsung, Hyundai, and LG became synonymous with stability, prestige, and financial security. Together, Korea's 5 largest chaebols make up nearly 2/3 of the nation's stock market value, yet they directly employ only 12% of workers. This corporate concentration stifles smaller businesses, innovation, and entrepreneurship. But in Korea, it yields only 20%, leaving many students in debt with little to show for it. Anxiety around academic performance seeped into every stage of childhood, even kindergartens. Admission is typically reserved for the top 1% of students. In 2010, nearly half of top government officials and half of financial CEOs were graduates of these universities. Even outside the elite schools, around 70% of Koreans attend university, the highest rate in the world. But this has created a paradox. Despite being highly educated, Korea also has one of the highest youth inactivity rates globally. Many young Koreans either go to university or quietly give up on life, and often both. By 2020, 1 in 4 Korean students reported symptoms of depression, and over just 6 years, the number of children aged 6 to 11 treated for depression had doubled. These events left the South desperately poor and vulnerable. Despite U.S. support, the only path forward was rapid economic growth. This fueled a $20 billion private tutoring industry of hagwons, elite cram schools that cater to those who can afford them. Pressure peaks at the infamous Sunung exam, a grueling 8-hour test that can decide a student's entire future. South Korea likes to see itself as a meritocracy. But the reality is that students without the money for elite hagwons are often doomed before they even begin. And the government rightly saw an educated workforce as the key. And material success, leaving many to question whether the country's meteoric rise was worth the immense personal cost. Yet beneath the shimmering skyscrapers and global brands lies a far darker reality, one pushing the country toward a dystopian future. In 2020, South Korea recorded 500 deaths from a chilling phenomenon so unique it earned its own term, gwarosa, or death by overwork. At the heart of this toxic culture are a handful of powerful conglomerates known as chaebols that not only dominate the economy, but also wield immense political influence. Samsung alone accounts for nearly 20% of Korea's entire GDP. In a country controlled by a few, not the many, people are increasingly turning away from life itself. To maintain a stable population, every woman must have an average of 2.1 children. Yet South Korea's fertility rate is just 0.7, one-third of the replacement rate. In 2020, for the first time in its history, South Korea recorded more deaths than births. The government has tried solutions ranging from bizarre TEV campaigns to encouraging girls to start school earlier, so they'll be more appealing to men, but none address the root causes. To understand modern South Korea's crises, we must go back in time. Under President Park Chung-hee, education became the cornerstone of South Korea's redevelopment. As the saying goes, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. With education seen as the only way to rise socially, families poured everything into securing their children's success. For an 18-year-old Korean, the dream is to get into a prestigious SKY university, Seoul National, Korea, or Yonsei, seen as the ultimate gateway to success. Today, over 500,000 young Koreans are neither working nor looking for work. With nearly half of these inactive youth holding university degrees, in past decades, sacrifice meant contributing to a collective goal, transforming a war-torn country into an economic powerhouse. But today, communal purpose has eroded. This has created an education bubble where ever higher degrees are required just to stand out, driving families to spend more while reaping less. Deeply ingrained gender norms compound the crisis. At the same time, the job market is dominated by a handful of chaebols. Such rigid hierarchies breed toxic work environments. Korea has ranked as the worst OECD country for women in the workplace for 12 consecutive years. This relationship has fostered corruption. From the Seoul ferry disaster, where illegal modifications, the result is not just a stagnating economy, but a society grappling with record levels of depression, suicide, and disillusionment. In December 2024, South Korea shocked the world when its president attempted to declare martial law, revealing just how fragile the country has become beneath its glittering surface.